Hey everyone, Miss Barker here. Moving on with some fraction learning targets. Today we're going to work on identifying common multiples and identifying the least common multiple between two denominators. And on the next slide, I'll explain a little bit more about why we're doing this as it relates to our fraction learning targets. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make a list of the multiples of 6. And I think we'll just do the first 10 multiples of 6. Now, when we talk about multiples, we worked on factors a little bit last week. Multiples are like the same thing as products. They're the answers to a multiplication problem, but a specific multiplication problem where one of those factors has to be 6. So when we're finding the multiples of 6, this is just like in first and second grade when you first learned how to talk about multiplication or repeated addition, started working on skip counting. So you're going to be skip counting by twos. I think that the best way to do this is just to show each one of those multiples in a list. So think about yourself looking at a multiplication chart and just looking at your 6 facts, or even thinking about one of the multiplication tests you did this year. Think about a whole paper just full of your 6, and we're going to go in order. Okay, so we're going to start with our lowest counting number, which is 1. We're going to write 6 times 1, and we're not actually going to write each one of those facts out. We're just going to write the product, and those are the same thing as multiples. Okay, so 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. And if you really want to write those out, like write 6 times 4 is 24, that's okay too. I just think this is probably the easiest way to write these out and organize them. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 9 is 54. And 6 times 10 is 60. Okay, I'm going to stop there for 6. Now, each time what's happening is I'm adding 6 to each one of these, or you can think about, again, 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3. Okay, so we just listed the first 10 multiples of 6. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing and find multiples of the number 4. So again, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. And one way you can kind of check yourself if you're saying these out loud and you're going kind of quick like I am and writing them down or typing them out, just look every time and see, is the relationship between this number and the next number adding 4? And then if it is, yep, you're right. So we have 24 is 6 times 4, and then 28, 7 times 4, 32 is 8 times 4, 36, 9 times 4, and 40, 10 times 4. Okay, now what we're going to be using this for is to find common denominators with fractions. And for us to do that, we want to focus on the least common multiple of 6 and 4, at least for this problem. So we're going to look for the least common multiple that they both have in their list. So let's look. 6 and 4. Nope. 8 and 8 is not a multiple of 6, but oh, look right here. They both have 12. So the least common multiple of the numbers 6 and 4 is 12. Now you might also notice, hey, Miss Barker, I noticed that they share more common multiples, and you're right. I see right here, I see 24, and I see, if we went a couple more multiples of 4, well, we could say here is 36 too. If we went a couple more multiples of 4, we would find 48, and 48 are shared too. 44 and 48. Okay, but remember, we want to focus on the least common multiple for what we're going to use this for with fractions. Okay, so now here's kind of our rationale of practicing this today, the reason why. We will need to find common multiples when adding and subtracting fractions with uncommon or unlike denominators. This is how we choose what common denominator both fractions can be made equivalent to, those new denominators that we can change the fractions into. So we're not actually going to do this addition problem, this 3/8 plus 1/5, but we're going to set it up like we are going to. So we will do this later this week. You're going to be adding 3/8 plus 1/5. And hopefully you're noticing that those denominators, 5 and 8, are not the same. That means that we can't just squish them together. We cannot add 3 plus 1 is 4 and 8 plus 5 is 13 and have 4/13ths be the product of 3/8 and 1/5. You can't do that. They have to have the same denominators before you can add or subtract. So for us to figure out what those common denominators are, we need to find our least common multiple, or LCM. I'll call it the least common multiple of both of those denominators. So we're going to find all the multiples of 8 and the multiples of 5 until we find one that they have in common or the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started doing that, because that is going to be the fraction that we turn denominator that we turn both of those into using multiplication. So I'm going to start with 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 7 is 56. Okay, now I'm going to just stop there. And you might be thinking, when I do this and I'm trying to find the least common multiple, when do I know how to stop? Like, am I going to write down 50 different multiples of 8? There is no really rule for when to stop, but those of you that have your multiplication facts really solid, you'll start to notice when this happens. Remember when we did this in the classroom earlier this year? I would be writing out the list of multiples and I'd tell you, when you see one that both of these numbers have in common, yell stop. That's kind of what I want you to think about when you do this. So I would say a good rule would be, if you can't see one right away, is to maybe do 5 of them. And then if you do 5 or 6 or maybe 8 for each one, and you don't find one they have in common, then you can just keep going. Okay, now I'm going to do my multiples of 5. So 5 times 1 is 5, 10, and it's going to sound like I'm skip counting. 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 is 5 times 7, 40, and then here's why I'm hoping the whole class would say, stop, because you found it already. Our least common multiple between 5 and 8 is 40. So if we were to add these, which we aren't going to really do, you would be turning both of these denominators into 40ths. That is the number that we can turn both of these into equivalent fractions with, because it is a multiple of 5 and it is a multiple of 8. So 5 times 8 equals 40. 1 times 8 equals 8. So 8/40ths and 1/5 are equivalent fractions. And 8 times 5 equals 40. And if I didn't know that, I could get this from this list, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 40 is the 5th multiple of 8. And 3 times 5 is 15. Now that we have a common denominator, we can easily add and subtract these two fractions.